Assalamualaikum and good day. In this video, we're going to learn about web application development. So what is web application development? Basically, it is the process involved with building a web application. It is more focused on interacting with the web browser than standard engineering processes. So most cases of web application development will involve defining the problem, mocking up the solution, engaging with users, adopting a framework or technology, and finally building and testing the web application. In most cases, iteratively with the users. So basically, how are we going to develop the web application? There are a few steps that we need to follow. First, define the problem you are solving. So basically, defining the problem is critical. Your solution is born from your problem. Next, plan the workflow of your web application. So once you know your solution, map out the flow of how it will work. What needs to happen within your web application for it to solve the problem. Next, prototype your web application. So basically come up with a mock-up solution. Transform your workflow into a prototype. And your prototype is simply a tool for communicating your solution to your target user. Next, receive validation. So you need to present your prototype to potential users of your new web application. Record feedback and iterate on the design until you and your potential users are happy. Next, choose your technology. So basically, we will use different tools, platforms, or frameworks to build your web application. It is important to choose a tool or a technology that fits the job, in this case, which is your web application, and not to go with what is popular. Next, you need to build your web application. So this will involve database, front end, and also back end. Next, you need to test your web application. Testing your web application is an ongoing process and usually happens during and after the building phase. You can automate testing or do it manually. During the testing phase, you should try to cover functionality, usability, compatibility, security, and also performance testing. Right after that, finally, you can host and deploy your web application. Hosting will involve running your web application on a server. So basically, you will need to buy a domain or choose a cloud hosting provider. To get your web application from your local machine to your cloud provider and deploy it. So you need to use some tool to do that. Now, let's look at how to build your web application. First and foremost, you need to have the database. So first you need to determine what data you need to store in your database and also your data types. Then you can build your database. The next one is front end. So in this stage, you will likely build your front end and back end at the same time, but your front end will loosely mirror your prototype that you have validated earlier. So the front end will always consist of HTML, CSS, and JS, which is JavaScript. This one is like what you have prototype your system earlier. Right, next is back end. So by building your back end, this is actually one of the toughest part of the web application development process. The primary functions of the back end is to provide the endpoints for your front end, which is like your CRUD functions, and then you need to have the authenticate users coding, authorization, and to serve basically all the front end features. Right, let's look more about front end development. Front end development is the process of converting data to graphical interface for user to interact with the data through the digital interaction using the HTML, CSS, or JavaScript. So there are several tools for developing front end of a website or web application. By understanding which tools are best fit for the specific sites or specific tasks will mark the difference between an average web application and also a well-designed scalable web application. Right, let's look at back-end development. So back-end functionality is basically developed using different scripting and programming language. Like you can use also .NET, PHP, Java, C++, Python, or even Eurobe. This is basically to create applications that deal with the data. Simply back-end development will use the input data received from the front end and manage in the databases. Every functional web application doesn't have only the text written on the website using HTML language. You also need the real-time text changes and also database synchronization. In other words, back-end development is actually the root of the website that offer power and also energy to grow to any kind of web application. Alright, now let's look at an example on how to develop web application with MVC. In this example, you are given a project named Asset Tracking System. So in this system, there are 5 modules to be developed. First is Asset, Inventory, Warehouse, Support, and Suppliers. Okay, now let's focus only to Asset. So in this Asset module, you need to determine the functions. So basically, the functions are listed out here, which is the login, logout, add item, edit item, delete item, and list all item. So in the development checklist, you need to start on come up with the structure of your login, logout features. For example, this is the first one. Okay, so for MVC, we know that we will need to have a controller, model, and also view as our components in the framework. So first, you need to determine the MVC component for this login, logout function. First, the controller. So you create the login servlet, logout servlet for the controller component. Next, the view component. So you create the login.jsp and home.jsp. Finally, the model components. So you create the login pane, login DAO, and also the DB connection for a very standard database connection. So next, let's look at the flow of the application for the structure of MVC that we have strategized just now. So in this login logout function for the asset module, so we start with the login.jsp. After the user insert the username and password, we will submit the form to the login servlet.java. Login servlet will validate the user input through the login DAO and login pin before checking the data in the database using the DB connection. So once successfully validated, the login pin will send a response to the login servlet to give access to home.jsp. So this is how the flow of the application framework works for MVC. So you can see here, model consists of login DAO, login pin, DB connection. View consists of login.jsp and home.jsp. Whereas for the controller, you have the login servlet.java. Nothing that's all for now. Please read Chapter 7 for more details and example on web development. Thank you.